Now, my first guest is bringing a heartbreaking story that she knows intimately. She knows firsthand what led to the tragic loss of a young woman and hopes that by sharing the family's story, there will be a catalyst for change. The parents of a teenager who starved to death alone in emergency accommodation believes that multiple agencies failed in their care. Their only child was able to keep them at distance on the grounds they did not accept the teen was transgender, an identity the parents say the teen later abandoned. However, the couple say they were, while attentive to their child's gender identity, various care professionals failed to adequately respond to the threat from a long-standing eating disorder, anorexia nervosa. Vanessa was found dead in a locked motel room in January 2023. She just turned 17 and weighed just 30 kgs. The last time Vanessa's parents had heard from the teen was 2 days previously in a message to her mum. Simply said, "Mama, I love you." What led up to this absolute tragedy was years of health and welfare agencies systematically cutting the parents out of this young girl's life and painting them as uncaring bigots, as well as a school system that affirmed her trans identity, all of which culminated in the willful blindness of these professionals so focused on Vanessa's gender identity, they did not pay enough attention to the eating disorder that sadly took her life. Joining me now, I'm pleased to have on the show Fern Hickson, spokesperson for Resist Gender Education. Fern, good afternoon. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Leah. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. And I mean, it's such a tragic story to have you on the show to talk about. And the words actually fail me when I read this entirety of this story.
Yes.
And I know you have.
Story.
It is. And I know you have a relationship with the family. So, and we're going to get to Vanessa's story, but I know you want to say something first, Fern.
Yes, I just would like to acknowledge Vanessa's parents who will be listening to this and offer our sympathy for their loss and also our understanding of the extra pain that's been caused by the inadequate care that all our government systems offered to Vanessa.
Yes, absolutely. To know Vanessa's story, we do have to go back, Fern. She was sexually molested at 5 by an older child at her school, and a rape crisis counsellor said puberty might trigger her trauma, and that is what happened, I believe. At age 12, that's where her eating disorder started, and over the next 5 years was in hospital 10 times. She also suffered from OCD and was diagnosed with autism. She was a young with many complex issues. However, school became easy for her. Years ahead of her peers in many subjects, she met a boy, but at high school was introduced to the concept of gender diversity, and at some point in 2021 became non-binary. Fern, do you know when she started identifying as a boy?
Not exactly, but she was homeschooled for quite a number of years before she went to secondary school. But she did actually start at intermediate, but because she was in hospital so often with the very low body weight, she didn't attend intermediate consistently. But once she started secondary school, she was in year 9. The first introduction she had was the teachers asking the students for their pronouns. So that's where it started. And then she had a long commute to and from school on the bus. And on that bus was a child her age who was identifying as a boy. And so she got introduced that way as well. There was also a Queer Straight Alliance at the school she was attending. And the parents now believe that Vanessa was probably attending that, although they didn't know it at the time. And then the other introduction was online. She was heavily into online places where kids would gather to talk about anorexia and also trans ideation. And so a lot of the conflict with her parents was to do with trying to keep her offline and off those really influential sites.
which would have been hard. During this time, during the time, Fern, a psychiatrist, advised her parents that Vanessa was using the trans ideation as a mask for her anorexia, and recommended not to affirm her trans identity, which of course the parents were trying to do. But I believe they were clashing with the school. The school was always interfering, I understand. Can you explain what happened over the school uniform?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. So the parents at home were trying to get Vanessa to understand that she was female and would always be female and couldn't change her sex. But at school, all of the teachers and a lot of the students and the dean and the counsellor all affirmed that she was really a boy, and they changed Vanessa's name to a male name, V, without the parents' consent. So she was called the male name at school, and when the parents were asked to buy a boys' uniform, they said they wouldn't do that. And they said that the psychiatrist had advised them not to affirm this transgender identity, which was being used as a mask. So the school supplied Vanessa with a note to say that she was allowed to wear trousers, and she just smuggled trousers from home to wear. I believe that's what happened.
Unbelievable. And all this time as well, the parents were being treated as uncaring and bigots. Is that correct?
Yes, they were told by the dean that they were being ridiculous, even though they were actually following psychiatric advice. And this psychiatrist had been working with Vanessa for at least 5 years, so knew her a lot better than the teachers at the school who might have known her, for a few months.
Fern, when Vanessa then left school, there were many welfare agencies that became involved. Is that correct?
Yes, so what happened is that the conflict with her parents escalated because everywhere the parents turned, all of the professionals were saying that they should just be affirming Vanessa, and they knew that wasn't the right thing to do. So there was a lot of conflict at home, and eventually, soon after Vanessa turned 16, she walked out of home, having had a big argument about internet usage. And she was taken in by a family that she knew from school, and she lived with them for about 6 months. And in that time, she completely cut off her parents, and they had no contact with her. And then the situation with the family broke down, and Vanessa had nowhere to live. So then she was Presbyterian support placed her into emergency housing, and she was also involved with Work and Income and ACC, and she was enrolled at the correspondence school, so she was still at school but online. And I think the Salvation Army was also involved in her care. So there were a lot of agencies, supposedly looking out for her. But none of them, some of them, the parents have discovered later, didn't even know that Vanessa had an anorexia diagnosis and that she'd been in hospital 10 times. So they didn't know she was anorexic. They were all just focused on the fact that she wanted to be a boy, wanted to be seen to be a boy, and they were affirming that.
At what stage was she ordered to do compulsory treatment? Was that while she was still at school, or?
Yes, it was. I might not have the date exactly right, but I think it was 2019, and so she was at home with her parents then.
Right.
She didn't leave her parents until 2022.
Yes.
So she'd been under a compulsory mental health order for 3 years or so. And then in 2022, soon after she left home, it was abruptly cancelled. And then the parents wrote a letter to the judge and said, this will mean that Vanessa has nothing that stops her from starving herself to death. Because the thing that Vanessa hated more than eating was being in hospital.
Yeah.
So now being forced to go to hospital was not going to be held over her. And so 10 months later, what they predicted happened.
Fern, how did she get into this accommodation? Why was she in this hotel room or where she was staying?